Good evening. We are here for Eurocomunicazione and we are at IFAD for the Innovation Day. And we are for interview Puri, Associate Vice President, Strategy and Knowledge Department of IFAD. Mrs. Puri, what's the impact of blockchain technologies for small-scale farmers?
It's a really good question. Blockchain technologies are usually seen to be something that is very elitist and only can be used by privileged communities. But actually, blockchain technologies have a number of benefits for small-scale farmers. One, if we want to think about production systems that are using environmentally and climatically sensitive methodologies, blockchain technologies can really help us track and trace the entire value chain, both from the origination to overall production, as well as then to markets, to understand as to whether all of the inputs that are going into production are climatically, environmentally, socially, and governance-wise safe and are doing no harm. And when these products are going to markets, we can also understand as to how much of these products and their transportation was contributing to both the greenhouse gas sequestration as well as to climate smart initiatives. And this happens because you can tag electronically the inputs as well as the outputs that are going into markets. So how this also helps farmers is because then you can use certification methodologies to understand as to whether something is, for example, organically produced. Contrary to current opinion, actually there are no worldwide standards for what is organic production or what is climatically and environmentally safe production. With the use of blockchain technologies, you can track and trace that and be very confident that the products and the inputs that those products are using are safe and are good for the environment, for society, for governance, and for the climate. The second way in which blockchain technologies can really help us and small-scale farmers is in financial access. We know that a lot of farmers do not want to use brick and mortar systems to access financing. Blockchain technologies can help to get them financing very easily and track and trace money as well.
Another question for you. Is the current international commitment for climate finance enough or at least half goal in supporting small-scale farm production agriculture?
It's again a really good question. So let me give you a sense of the magnitude of climate finance that is currently being galvanized. Currently, we have, as of 2020 or 2019, the new and additional climate finance that was being put out across a variety of stakeholders, so public, private, households, governments, etc., was approximately 630 billion. You know how much of this was actually going to small-scale farmers? 1.7%. So less than 2% of new and additional climate finance is going to small-scale farmers. Why is this a tragedy? This is a tragedy because small-scale farmers are responsible for more than 30% of our overall food. So if we really want to build resilient food systems, and if we want to take care of climate as a whole, we've got to make sure that more of our climate, new and additional financing is going to small-scale farmers. So it's at a very, very low 1.7% currently.
Last question for you, Vice President. People are often confused between mitigation and adaptation action for countering climate change. What are the differences to make it clear once for all?
So mitigation is essentially any action that helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We know that greenhouse gas emissions contribute to a warming of the climate and increased variability. So any action, so for example, planting trees, using renewable energy, such as from wind and from solar, are all considered mitigation action. Adaptation is any action that helps to adapt or reconcile ourselves to changing climate and the variability. So we know that the buildup of carbon dioxide, of methane, all of these greenhouse gas emissions leads to what is called the greenhouse gas effect. That's the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. That means that the climate, that the earth becomes warmer and warmer, which means that the variation in weather patterns becomes even more unpredictable. This leads to flash floods, to unpredictable droughts, and to many other variabilities and many other consequences. One consequence, for example, is droughts and floods, and that leads to forced migration and forced displacement, and therefore conflict. So it's really important to think about mitigation that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, but adaptation that helps us to adapt and adopt new technologies and processes so that we can really become better at dealing with climate change. Clearly, the two have to go together. But really importantly also in the context of climate change and climate finance, it's important to recognize that a lot more resources are currently coming into mitigation. And that's because they are climate and market-ready technologies. Into adaptation, because there are locally led adaptation solutions, we have very little resources coming in. The last time we at IFAD calculated this, for every dollar that was being put in new and additional for adaptation, $17 to $18 were being raised for mitigation. Clearly, there's a big difference, and especially developing countries are very vulnerable in the absence of adaptation money, and it's really important to reconcile that imbalance.
Thank you for your answers, Vice President.
Thank you.